Okay, and we are recording. Good afternoon. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Rise and Repair Repartee. I have a wonderful guest today, Dr. Angela Sadler-Williamson, and you are going to absolutely love her. I'm going to have her introduce herself, but just know this filmmaker, this professor, educator, and advocate, you're going to absolutely love her and all that she has to say and enlighten us today. Our subject is activating your activism. Activating your activism. Voices for the voiceless. We are going to talk about how we can empower ourselves and empower others. Dr. Angela, would you give us a warm welcome and introduce yourself a little bit more and tell us a little bit about you?
Oh my goodness, Dr. Donna, it's such a pleasure to be here and to be on your show. Thank you so much for having me. Oh my goodness, so where do I start? Well, first, let's start with your title, Activating Activism. I want to be completely, transparent with your audience. I actually fell into this without realizing that I was actually following a long line of activists. And so that started for me back in 2015 when I decided that I wanted to tell the story of my husband's cousin, Rosa Parks. And telling her story and trying to get across a Rosa Parks that I wanted to see. That's how I fell into actually activism. And I didn't realize that I was falling into that. I went in to tell these stories on a personal and professional note. Okay. I'll talk personal. It was, you feel this way because you're a mother as well. But when we have children, we want to leave them something. We want to leave them a legacy. And one of the ways that I could leave a legacy was through something that I loved, which is videography. And so that was one of the ways I can do that. But on a professional level, and I think a lot of women that I've talked to, they have felt this way, and I never thought I would feel this way, but I did. Here I was, a mother and a wife, and had recently completed my doctorate, and I was at what I thought a professional crossroads. I was at a point in my life that I didn't want to be at. I wanted to be at another level, and I couldn't get to that level. It didn't matter what I tried to do, I couldn't get there. And after a while, it weighed on me. It became such an emotional strain on me that I was a completely different person. And in an effort to boost myself, professionally, which it started to wreak havoc on me personally, I wanted to tell the story of this woman that I had always admired. And through telling her story, I wanted that to reshape me as a woman as well. And so when I did that and just kept sticking with it, and then finally the movie was done and it was ready to be released, when I started on the film festival circuit, then all of a sudden it's, oh my goodness, it's starting to change so many people's lives that I am now fulfilling the shoes of a lady that I so admired. And people started asking me if I was an activist. I'm like, I don't think so, but it took people close to me to say that an activist can be on a lot of different levels. And on a certain level I was.
Wow. Wow, 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 wow. When you say you fell into it, you were in a different place emotionally, mentally, and then you just start the conversation about having to tell the story for your kids. Yeah. I think that's the other part of walking stuff out, and then things happen along the way that guide you to it. So you didn't have this big picture, I'm going to be an activist. You were not you were not going around saying, I shall tell the story, I shall do this. That's not the story that you have. That's not part of your history. This is you doing some self-healing work, wanting to make sure you give the message and make sure your children had something to look back at, and also making sure her story got told. And that infused you to move into this. That blows my mind. I did not know that. not completely. I mean, I thought set out to, you're a filmmaker. You're an anchor. You're somebody that's already in the film, in the filming industry. So I didn't know that you didn't have this activism side of you. It was birthed through the film.
It was, and I think sometimes too, and I think that's why I love your group on Facebook, because we talk about repairers. And I think in order for God to repair us, he needs to bring us to our knees. And a lot of times we think of the knees in prayer, but a lot of times for me, bringing me to my knees was really showing me how important it was for me to be humble and to listen. And so when he did that, I started opening up, those senses to really listen to people and listen to their stories. So now, because we all know that God does not make mistakes, he calls us into certain directions of our life, but sometimes it takes us to be at a certain place where we can listen to it. So I would have to say, if this is who I am today, that's what God had designed at the beginning, but I wasn't seeing it.
Okay.
And so that's where this part in my life, where I look at where I was in 2015 and starting that journey to tell this story, I needed to be a part of that journey. And that journey wasn't something that all of a sudden, as soon as the film was released, that I saw myself as this activist. No, it would take several years after that for me to really start to understand what God was trying to do in my life. And what he was trying to do is he was trying to tell me that I can be an activist. And I love this because a friend of mine who I've met, Alonzo Wilson, he owns his own production company. He calls it staying in your lane. And that's how God uses us, is he uses us in the lanes that he's designed us to be. And so I think, Dr. Donna, if I had started this saying, I'm going to be like those amazing people who started Black Lives Matters and things, if I was going to be like those leaders, I would have failed, because that was not the lane that God had for me. The lane he had for me, which I'm so comfortable in, is the lane of a storyteller and getting people's stories out there to change other people's lives. And so with that being said, I mean, these are things I can look back on and see how he had me doing that. But I wasn't realizing that, because I had put myself in such what I call, and what I put in Women Who Illuminate, the book before yours, I had put myself in such an emotional pit. I couldn't see. I was just trying to crawl myself out of that pit. But he was there the whole process, using the talents that he had given to me that I had really put dormant for such a long time.
Oh, that's that word again. That's that word, dormant. We don't recognize it. There's so many things that are dormant, and they don't even rise in us until we humble ourselves. And then he touches them and he makes them something wonderful, makes it something wonderful. You've got to tell us a little bit about the story. And I love that you said I had to be humble before I can rise, or before I can be of influence, before I can be any type of encourager. I had to be humble first. But tell us the story of Rosa Parks and why you actually told that story. That's your aunt, that's your cousin, but why you chose Rosa Parks. And then I also want to ask you about the children's book, because activating your activism, like you said, it's different for everybody. I want to say age as well, every age, yes. So tell us a little bit about My Life with Rosie, and then tell us about the children's book, so that we can all become, or I would say understand our place in activism.
So in 2015, when I started writing this documentary, it was really because my husband's father had passed away. And at the time that my husband's father passed away, and his name was Tom. Tom was considered the patriarch of the family because he was the oldest son, the oldest brother with 4 sisters. And so when he passed away, And my husband, being the oldest as well, asked me to, at this time in 2015, everybody has, and I always want to bring this to everyone's attention. You have to realize in 2015, I was literally jobless. I had just finished my doctorate and did not have a job. Because I was not getting full time, I had left for a private company to work in their digital marketing department. Phenomenal experience, just wasn't me. So it didn't last that long. So I was jobless. So at the point of me being jobless, my husband asked me, he said, well, since you have a little time on your hands, can you put together my father's memorial service? And so in putting together my father-in-law's memorial service and putting together a video with a few of my friends that I worked with in the industry, I started to realize that there were parts of my father-in-law's life that would have been lost had I not pulled those stories together. Okay. And so then with two of his younger sisters staying with me and hearing one of them, Aunt Carolyn, telling me the stories about all of her work that she did with Cousin Rosie, it just started to click that I needed to start to tell that story, tell the story of Cousin Rosie and her relationship with Aunt Carolyn, because Aunt Carolyn was still working hard to keep her memory alive in Detroit.
Wow, wow.
So, and telling that, and so starting with that philosophy at first of getting the story out between these two cousins, everything else started to come together. The first part that came together was my husband finding The Rebellious Life of Mrs. Rosa Parks by Dr. Jean Theo Harris. And he brought me this book because Dr. Theo Harris had interviewed my father-in-law before he passed away, but also interviewed Aunt Carolyn and the other three sisters to get the overall, the big picture of Rosie's life in Detroit. So that was a story that no one ever tells. And so I wanted to tell that story, but tell it from the Williamson side of the family, because there is another side of the family, but I wanted to focus on the Williamson side.
Okay.
So in telling that story about Aunt Carolyn continuing Cousin Rosie's legacy and Cousin Rosie moving to Detroit and all of like 4 decades of activism in Detroit that we never learned about.
Yeah.
All of that stuff started to come together with the synergy, and holding that synergy was Aunt Carolyn and Dr. Theo Harris. So with the two of them and me digging at the research, which as a person with your doctorate, that's what we do, we research. The pieces started to come together, and in the interviews, that's when the story started to form. So the actual evolution of the story came from just going and getting that research together. And so when we get to 2 years later, because it literally took us 2 years to put this documentary together, because at that point I started part-time teaching again, and everybody else who was working on the project had full-time jobs, and we were all doing this in the cloud and I, pretty much remotely. And so when the story started to come together, that's when the story of a Rosa Parks that people didn't know about started to come. And when I saw that, and when I looked at the documentary and saw that story was coming together, then I realized we as a nation really don't understand, unless you are very close to her, we don't understand who the real Rosa Parks is. And that's when it started to take off in that direction.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, and that's the portion where it starts to activate in you.
Yes.
And then the story. Okay. Because then the story, when it comes, the story's coming all together, right? Like you said, it's coming together. You think you're just telling a story. You're giving us a lens of Aunt Rosie, I said Cousin Rosie, that nobody else has. But you don't know what it's doing in you. And then you don't know also, because I go to see the film, I take a bunch of kids to see the film, and we see the film, and then it activates something in us to see her as a regular person. I get chills thinking about the fact that she was just a person. And all she said was no. All she said was no. But if you go back and look from that point on, from the point after the civil rights movement, and then on into the years, how much she advocated, all that she went through, the horrible things that she still went through, and she still held her head high and kept going. I'm telling you, that documentary activates something in me. I saw it, 2 years ago, and I'm still blown away by who she was. And so I get part of you being, okay, this is coming together and it's doing something in me. The one thing I would say, though, in activating your activism, it looks so different for everyone. It looks so different. That's the part I'm like, speak to that, because your activism, I would have never thought of it that way, but now I think of you as this wonderful activist. I really do. And I think of the way in which you do it. It's so intriguing. It's so inviting. And I don't feel like I have to be anybody else, or I don't have to do it like someone else. And I'm definitely for Black Lives Matter. I truly am. But I'm not in the streets. My place here with Alex is right here. What can we do? What can we say? So you having that book now, the children's book, your children's book, you're allowing another generation to become advocates, to make sure that they are advocating for rights and to identify themselves in the world. Talk to us, talk to me about the book and why that children's book. Why?
It's funny because it's everything that you said. So all of a sudden I am, and everybody's calling me this storyteller. I'm like, whoa,
Yeah.
it puts you on a whole nother level. And it's like, I'm doing what I love, but then I'm realizing that if I've made this step, that I'm passionate about everything that's happening. So basically, we get to 2019, and the documentary's been out for 2 years, and I am getting all types of awards for this documentary, that every time I get something, I'm completely shocked, because when God worked on my humility, let me tell you, he worked on it.
Well, if you're going to give me this award, okay, but I'm just making sure I stay
like, really me? And
not want to go to the pit again.
But then, 2019 is this extraordinary year for me. It's the year that I realized that even though I don't have what I thought I set my attention on, God's given me something bigger and better. And then he opens up the door for me to write the foreword to this series, where I never really even ever thought of writing a book. Although towards the end, people were saying, what should you do next? Maybe, and people had suggested, but I'm like, I don't know. But that door starts to open. And then we get to 2 days before the release of Women Who Illuminate. Okay. And 2 days, a Rosa Parks Barbie doll comes out. It's absolutely gorgeous. And because people have been following me, and they followed the, the progress of the whole documentary and the film festival circuit and everything that's happened, people start tagging me on this beautiful doll that I'm like, oh my gosh, it's a Rosa Parks Barbie doll. And I'm excited. And then all of a sudden, I, read the product description, and it pretty much says that Rosa Parks was pretty ordinary until an extraordinary moment changed her life. And I'm thinking, that's not what I've been talking about for 2 years. And oh my goodness. Now, at this point, I do know that it's been all over, and I've made people see Rosa Parks like you see her. But to have this huge toy manufacturer sort of diminish things, I think that's when I really started to see that I was an activist. Because I'm exactly like what you said, I'm not that kind of activist. So because I wasn't, I never thought I was, but I guess I was. And so it really bothered me, but I put it on in the back of my mind because I had this book coming out, and it talked about the story of how I got the story of Cousin Rosie to a mass audience, but it still was kind of that thing, you know, that we all get this. It just tickles at the back of your brain.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nagging.
Like,
Yeah.
there's
There's
something
something there.
about
I can't tell you what it is, but I
yeah.
know something there. Yes.
Yeah. And so basically, a few weeks later, you know, the Barbie doll's out, product description is out there. Dr. Theo Harris is not having it. She's on Twitter saying, oh my God, no, she was not ordinary. And this is why, and she's going out and I'm letting her have it. Because see, Dr. Theo Harris is that right kind of activist. So when you're kind of like the activist I am, you're just like, retweet and share, and you're like, yeah, go lady, I'm behind you. It's saying I know I should do something, but I don't know what to do.
Okay.
Yes. And so I guess about mid September, I'm in this mastermind call with Kate Butler, our book publisher, and a couple other ladies who are just phenomenal. And we go and we do you know, like what I call is a round table, and we get to me, and I tell them, you know, I right now I feel so blessed because I know where I was 4 years from, you know, like, you know, 4 years ago I was jobless, you know, and you know, I've been doing this. I said, but you know what, this one thing is bothering me. So I started to share with them, and I said, you know, it's one thing but my documentary doesn't reach children. I don't know what to do. And Kate Butler's looking at me like I have 5 heads, because she's like, you know, Angela, you do know I started out writing children's books. I'm like, yeah, you did a really great job, but I don't know how to write a children's book. She said, yeah, and you didn't know how to write a forward either, but you did it. And so I'm thinking, well, maybe I can write a children's book, but I'm not really seeing, I don't really make that step to do it until Dr. Theo Harris actually reaches out to me, and she asked me to write a letter to this toy manufacturer on behalf of Rosa Parks family. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, she's come to me, because there's 2 sides to Rosa Parks family, and and I am someone who's married into the family, but she's coming to me because she respects me enough that she wants me to write this letter on behalf of the family to ask this toy manufacturer, can you rewrite that product description about Rosa Parks? She wasn't ordinary. She was an activist before December 1st. She was already getting the youth together. She had formed the NAACP Youth Council. She, you know, even after that, she moved to Detroit and she had activism, you know, things like that. And so I wrote this letter on behalf of Rosa Parks family to the toy manufacturer in support of Dr. Jean Theo Harris, and they made that change. But what they did was, in making that change, they only did it online, which was important. But I felt that at that point I needed to do something else, and that's when I go with what my friend Alonzo Wilson says, is you need to stay in your lane. And my lane was telling stories. And I had the perfect editor to help me write that story. So in writing the story, the one thing I wanted to ask myself is, what was my intention for this story? Because I didn't do that, because I was in a different place when I started the documentary. So what are my intentions? Well, the first intention that I had was, I firmly believe that our children are not born with hate in their hearts. Awesome. Hate is a characteristic that they learn, and they learn it from adults. So if I could get to them before adults can change their minds, what would my intention be? What do I need to talk? How do I need to talk to them? And setting that intention is when I started to tell a story that people told me about. And this was, And it's not a complaint. I would say it was a critique that I got
Okay.
mostly from a lot of people. And they said, I wish I knew a little bit more about that relationship between Aunt Carolyn and Cousin Rosie. Now, I wasn't able to do that in the documentary because I didn't have the B-roll to tell the story. But,
Story. Okay.
but as in when I'm writing a book, I have an illustrator who could tell that story for me. So I
Ah,
wanted,
you give us a
so,
picture of it.
yes, because they can buy,
Yes, give us a picture.
then they add that picture for me. So in telling the
Okay.
story, I knew that I could take a portion of my documentary that elementary school children could watch, which is the entire family on the bus, but let me complement that and write a book. And that's when My Life with Rosie, a bond between cousins, started, because I knew that that could be the perfect complement to that one scene in the documentary that I can reach out to children in. And so with that, that's when I told the story between Aunt Carolyn as a little girl growing up under her mentor slash cousin, Rosa Parks.
Parks. Okay, that's the heart of it for me. Because one, you had no idea. Your rising comes, I said women who rise and repair. It comes, first the repair comes for your heart. And then the rise comes in you writing it and acknowledging what you have. And then you being intentional about what the messaging is that you want to get out to the world. And then you give us a picture with the book so we can see what it looks like. And we can see ourselves there and how we can make a difference. If you had, and I know we're coming to a close, if you had something that you wanted to say, one, I'm saying this to parents, okay, as advocates for our kids in the next generation, if you had a message for them, if you had a message for children, because I hear the big picture message, but if you could just narrow it down to a few words, what would you say to someone like you changing careers, or should say, no, find themselves not even in a career at the moment? What would you say to them? And then what would you say to our kids? That's where I want you to close it out. Tell me those two, give me those before we go today.
Okay, so to adults, especially women out there, especially when as women we hear no a lot when we are trying to either rise in our career or do things that that we feel that we want to do. It's the desire of our heart. One of the things I had to realize is that because I'd been hearing no for so long, and what it did, and it wreaked havoc with me spiritually, emotionally, and physically. Because if you go back and you look at pictures of me in 2014 and 15, you'll be able to see where it got me physically too. One of the things I had to tell myself was, you know what? What if I told myself yes? What would that be like? And so sometimes you have to tell yourself yes, and then other times you can say, what's the worst they can say to me is no. Doesn't mean it might stop you for a minute, but it doesn't mean that you're a failure. Because at that point, I mean, even after 2 years of success on the documentary film circuit, I was still feeling like a failure because I had such a different outlook. So I would say in that case, it's okay to tell yourself yes. It is okay to tell yourself yes. And even though somebody might tell you no, you can turn around and tell yourself yes and do something, because that's what I had to do. I really had to do that. Now for children, one of the things I like to do is, especially a lot of parents now are asking, how can I talk to my children about activism? And one of the ways I wanted to reach them is by different things that they can do right now. Like, for example, how can you make friends with someone who is different from you? And then how can you appreciate those differences? And then last but not least, I tell them, now go out and do it, because that's what Rosa Parks was doing when she created that NAACP Youth Council, is that she was using the youth to get the message out. And so at the end of this children's book, I leave those 3 things for kids to do, to be part of it. I call it Cousin Rosie's Youth Council, which was really fun because we created a crest for it, all that fun stuff. But I actually encourage children to be part of this council and go out there and appreciate others' differences and learn how to make friends who are different than you. Imagine if we got that in a pre-K, and we got that in kindergarten, and we got that in first grade. So imagine those children who are just starting this year, getting that book, putting those 3 things into action. Imagine them 20 years, 30 years, 40 years from now. I could possibly believe that we would not ever have another civil unrest again, because those children have started on the correct path of appreciating differences.
Awesome. Awesome. Do you hear me? That's how we change the world, and we change it with our kids first. We do that. We actually infuse in them some hope and a different lens and their acceptance. I love it. You gave them the takeaways, what to do and how to do it. And it's not that hard. It's not that hard to open your heart to somebody that looks different than you do. You can truly be an activist. You can activate your activism just by being yourself. Oh my gosh. Okay, I want to ask you this, because I know a lot of people are going to, well, they already want to get in touch with you. Where can we get in touch with you? Of course, where can we find your books? I'll say both of your books. And if we had a need or just want to learn more about activism, can you give us an address or a place that we can find you?
So everything that we discussed today is available on Amazon. My Life with Rosie, the documentary, is on Amazon. If you're a Prime member, you get that for free. My Life with Rosie, A Bond Between Cousins, the children's book, which a lot of adults are reading too, and I love getting those pictures, by the way. That is available on Amazon, as well as Women Who Illuminate, Dr. Angela Sadler Williamson, if you want the one with my cover on it. So that is on as well. So that's, all 3 of those are on Amazon. To actually reach out to me, the best way to go is to come to my website, drangelasadlerwilliamson.com. At the very bottom of the page, you can contact me and it will come directly to me. That's the easiest way of doing that right now. And so between the website and Amazon, you definitely can keep in touch with me.
Oh, absolutely wonderful. You know what? I feel like, although I've seen the documentary and I've read and I know your story, I feel like I was actually able to come into it. And I feel so much more encouraged for those who are watching, as well as our kids, so much more encouraged that I know that there's more that we can do in this time of civil unrest and all that we're looking at. And I just don't want folks to think that it only looks one way. Everybody's way is different, and we're no less and we're no more. We're just people trying to move through this and doing the best that we can to be actively engaged in the movement, actively engaged. So I want to say thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I appreciate you for coming on today, and I want to just make sure that folks can reach out and get to you some more. Okay, give us a close, and I want to just say thank you again. You can close us out.
Oh, okay, I get to close you out.
Yes.
Everybody, it has been such a pleasure to actually reach out to you today, and definitely know that you do matter, and whatever life is throwing at you right now, it is just something that will be a passing phase for you. So you have a choice. And this is, I'm only telling you this because someone told me this. You have a choice. You can choose to rise on the other side or choose not to. But I know if you're watching this today, you will choose to rise. So take care of yourself and be well.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Angela. We will chat with you again soon. Yes. Thank you. And thank you all for watching Rise and Repair Repartee. We will see you again in a week.
Thank you. Love you. Bye.
Love you all. Bye-bye.